Welcome to the Unleashing the Champion Within podcast with your host, yours truly, Andrea Mason, your global voice. Stay tuned and get ready to listen to those as they go from victim to victorious. Hear their stories and connect with them. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another segment of Unleashing the Champion Within podcast with your host, Andrea Mason, your global voice, your first choice, alumna of Les Brown, and the creator and innovator of Press Play, Plan Life According to You, LLC. We have an amazing segment for you today as we spotlight another amazing individual on their triumphs, their success, and their main mission on fulfilling their legacy of their lives. Today, I am excited to have upon my platform Alison Reeves. Alison, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Andrea. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's an honor, privilege to take you time out of your busy day to share with us and share your Unleashing the Champion Within moment. But first and foremost, introduce yourselves to the audience and then we'll get started.
Yeah, my name is Alison from AlisonReeves.co, and I started as a blogger in entrepreneurship in 2011 and quickly propelled my marketing career into all kinds of digital marketing before going off on my own in 2019 as a consultant. And so I've been business and marketing consulting since 2017. And a lot of my work, even though I kind of lean into a lot of the practical digital marketing, a lot of my work has to do with what I call mindset restoration and somatic work for healing wealth wounds. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell, but I'm a business and marketing consultant with some mindset superpowers.
Excellent, excellent. So being that is a area where a lot of individuals kind of shy away from because it's a technical component. But I believe, in the business of myself, you have to understand the business, the behind the scenes, how it works effectively to then bring your message across to the masses. So starting on your journey, what would be the Unleashing the Champion Within moment that propelled you to where you are today in your career?
Yeah, I think a huge moment of ignition was when I was working full time as a marketing manager for a startup feeling companies. They weren't a startup company, but they were growing really fast. It was a small team. And the founder of that company was in the real estate investing niche, which is a niche where there's a lot of wealthy people. And it's interesting that a lot of real estate investors end up selling education, or a lot of the top guys that I was working with. So I thought that was interesting that they're all selling real estate as a way to build wealth, which obviously it is. But a lot of those people, in order to stack their income, were selling education and funnels. And a huge eye-opening moment for me was when the founder of one of those companies was asking me to do business consulting for free for one of his colleagues.
Mm.
And that was a kind of an eye-opening moment where I thought, I'm undervaluing myself in the skill that I have, and I could be building this wealth for myself instead of someone else.
Hmm. Interesting. It is difficult, I think many a times in the industries that I'm in with mental health is we critique ourselves. We undervalue ourselves because as women and as nurturers, we want to help people. We want to pay it forward. We want to educate and collaborate and make sure that we have, the best of intentions. But what we lose attention is the value. And you bring a great point, because I know from most of my coaches and mentors, they said, well, where do you price yourself? And they kind of sit back and smile and you say, well, around this range or this range. And then what they break down is the education, the attentiveness, the ability to break it down into simple form, the ability to coach, the ability to teach. But most importantly, the biggest umbrella is the respect and communication, which I have found along the lines of your work is very significant in the line of work that you do, that engagement component, that relationship building. So go a little more deeper in that, if you will, on going to see that you have all this value, all your tools in your toolbox, but then somebody offering from an elite status that it's free. What kind of emotions were you going through at that point?
Yeah, I don't think I realized that I was the problem until until like 2022. So I have a book coming out in June of 2024 called The Embodied Abundance. what is
Oh,
it called?
excellent.
Embodied abundance. And what I talk about in that book is wealth wounds. And so I think like what we landed on in our conversation is a great example of a wealth wound, which is undervaluing myself. So I'm not worthy.
Mm,
And I got messages not just from this boss. So this boss is asking me to consult for his partners for free.
mm,
And that was just one of many messages that I got from the world that I allowed the world to teach me that I'm not worthy. I'm only worth a certain price point. Fast forward, I thought mindset work was baloney. So I had heard in entrepreneurship people talking about mindset work for ages, but I thought I just need the next strategy, the next thing, the working funnel, whatever. It
right.
wasn't until that was all in 2016, 2017. In 2019, that was the first time I realized that my biggest blocker was actually self-belief.
Mm,
It's actually my view of myself. And I had a coach say, like most of your problems before $50,000 months all relate back to self-belief.
right. Right.
And that was the first time I actually believed it.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's funny how you're seeing these messages subliminally or subconsciously, and people are sharing it with you, but it takes one person to kind of say, wait a minute, Allison, take a step back. Look at all of your value, look at all of your worth, and look at what they're willing to or choosing not to invest in you. And one of the key components on what I do with the Unleashing the Champion Within podcast, as well as with my coaching, is not, it definitely has to do with mindset, is but the vocabulary we use, problems. And I didn't want to interrupt. I was like, what's areas of improvement? Because we're so quick to critique ourselves. And if we haven't faced our past will continue to chase us, and those false limiting beliefs, negative beliefs kind of seep in. And so I would say your aha moment, if you will, and correct me if I'm wrong, or your epiphany and awareness was realizing it was your own self belief, as you had mentioned, that was kind of decreased or limited until you saw the value and the production and the belief of someone to make an investment in you mindfully, respectfully, but not financially. And I think that's what a lot of coaches and entrepreneurs these days is, well, I'll start out small. Well, if you start out small, then they're going to expect a certain amount. But if you start out small and you give them great value, and then you start having the awakening of your value and your worth, they're not going to contribute further. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think, when I say things like, I realized that quote unquote I was the problem, it's like I used to blame my financial situation on like the boss is not paying me enough, or
Mm,
this job is overworking me, or the market is this way. And those aren't actually the problems. The quote unquote problem is just my belief in the
right.
work that is already inherent to me and that the universe already has worked all that out for me.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you had mentioned the universe because I'm a big believer of the secret and law of attraction. The late, great Bob Proctor had actually virtually saved my life through his teachings, some years back in February 6th. 2016, but that's another episode. But yes, it's the belief within that we kind of stumble upon, because what we want to do is we want to spotlight our areas of skill, gifts, and talents. And when we do that, then and we expand ourselves out, being transparent and vulnerable. And I'm glad you mentioned the blame game of everyone. There's no shame in taking the blame and saying, well, you know what? I need to shift my lens. I have to sharpen my lens. I have to change my channel, is what I use in my line of coaching and work. So you were able to shift that and make it profitable. So let's talk a little bit about the latter part of your business, as you wanted to touch upon. Let's take a little peek into there. Like, share that with us.
Yeah. Well, actually, you kind of brought it up perfectly by mentioning like manifesting law of attraction. And I was a huge kind of student of manifesting for a long time, but I really struggled with like quote unquote getting it to work for me.
Right.
And that was until I discovered like somatic work in my nervous system. So I had all these huge successes with mindset. And then I had some of my biggest income months, like starting in 2019, 2020, 2021. But I kept hitting these walls of like,
Mm.
the affirmations aren't working anymore. My self-belief, like I'm still feeling really anxious about money. And I discovered a key to unlocking my mindset further was having a soothed and regulated nervous system, which a lot of law of attraction manifesting teachers, they talk about in order to have what you want, you have to feel what it's like to have it.
Right.
I hear very few of those teachers talking about how to feel. If
Mm.
our feelings are overwhelming, or if we're afraid to feel, or if we can't get out of bad feelings. And so that's what somatic work
Yeah.
did for me that really helped manifesting a law of attraction to actually quote unquote work.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is definitely a key component. We can't be happy all the time, we can't be angry all the time, but a lot of us, especially this day and age, when since the world's completely shifted inside out, upside down, and right side up, is our emotions controlling us as opposed to us controlling our emotions. Let me expand upon that but a little bit. In my line of work, in conjunction of yours, which I loved, was you have to feel to heal, but
Mm,
you don't have to feel to the point where you embody it and then it controls everything you do. Bob Proctor talks about, the quote, dis-ease cannot withstand a healthy mind. And when I was going upon the journey of revolution and choosing the path less traveled of the life transformational journey, it was difficult for me because I was always stuck. I was kind of in a merry-go-round, if you will, hamster wheel, if you were, if that helps a better analogy of I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. You have a bad day, and then you focus on that bad day or that hiccup or that innuendo. And just like the greats say, energy flows where focus goes.
mm.
And that's what you touched upon, that, keeping that high frequency, but also allowing yourself to be flexible for that pendulum to shift a little bit because we are human, but then bounce back, get back on that track and go with that a little bit more from you. What do you feel?
Yeah, and I think that's the part that I really struggle with was like, how do you get back on track?
Right.
And like in order to kind of similar quote to what you just said, a little different. Samantha Skelly talks about from where I got my somatic certification. She talks about in order to feel better, you
Mhm.
have to be a better feeler.
Yes.
So a lot of us with mindset work, we're like, I feel anxious. Okay, in order to manifest, I have to stop feeling anxious. And so we just try
Mhm.
to focus on not feeling anxious. What we're doing is gaslighting ourselves if we
Yes.
don't see that feeling through. And
Mhm.
so like letting yourself feel the anxiety, feel the sadness, and not just sitting in it, but then asking
Right.
that, like, what does it need? And
Mhm.
that might take help from a therapist or somatic practitioner or whatever. But
Right.
a really easy exercise I do when I'm feeling an overwhelming feeling is like I feel the feeling. I find that emotion in my body. So this is something you have to practice of like a lot of times anxiety is this like pokey feeling in my chest.
Right.
And I lean into the pokey feeling in my chest and then I ask that like what does it need? And
Mhm.
it needs like an example could be support. Like I
Mhm.
feel alone, I'm tired of doing this on my own, nobody is helping me. And then you lean into what does support feel like?
Mhm.
It feels like a warm blanket around my shoulders. It feels like my cat sitting in my lap. And this all may sound a little silly and woo-woo, but this is how you resource your nervous system so that your mindset work can actually be embodied. Because your mind is only up here.
Mhm.
And this is only a tiny part of your processing power.
Right.
Whereas your nervous system is a huge part of the rest of your processing power. And most of us are not tapping into that for our mindset.
Absolutely. And that's a great example because for me, I was going to a job, it go bankrupt, going to a job, restructuring, going to this. And so it was a constant, domino effect that I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm not good enough. And then I piled on in conjunction that with the family. And then I lost my mother and I just grinded in my work. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get through this like a bulldozer. But I love that you tapped into the what we call it in psychology, psychosomatic conditions, because it wasn't until my hospitalization in 2016, which was shy of a decade after losing my mother, that I had stage 5 myasthenia gravis. And I was just like, I was fine less than 24 hours, 48 hours ago. But then being at peace, being still, and asking the questions that you asked, which I love. Thank you for sharing. What is the emotion? Where is it coming from? And what do I need to fill that void, to heal it, to treat it, or whatever verbiage you use? And that's how I was able to get a second chance through that mindset and the law of attraction of being on that final hours in the hospital bed to saying, no, I know what it is. I realized it. I'm going to fix it, to be discharged less than 24 hours when they were going to grant me until further extension because of the conditions that my body was under. And what was the beauty of it, what Alison, was I had the ability to then realize all of the pre-existing autoimmune, medical, and emotional conditions were triggered because I didn't pinpoint that pain or that area of affection that I needed, whether it was a hug, whether it was to release anger, whether it was release frustration, or so forth. So thank you for bringing that to light.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So, as we want to be mindful of time, what are some amazing events or opportunities or projects that are coming down the pipe for you?
Yeah, I'm a busy person. I do a lot of things online. So the best way to learn about upcoming events is to go to alisonreeves.co/everything. And
Excellent.
I have mindset resources and business resources everywhere from free up to high ticket. And I'm launching the Embodied Abundance book in June of 2024, which is a trauma informed approach to manifesting. So, a lot of the stuff that Andrea and I touched on today on, it's about manifesting, but it leads to a lot of other things, including, mindset restoration and even up to healing through releasing trauma in very non traumatic ways. But I'm really excited about what the mind can do when it is connected to embodiment.
Yes, the mind is a powerful organ, muscle, if you will. If you don't work it, it doesn't work for you. And I think it's really powerful that, and I'm glad you mentioned this as well as in your announcements coming up, is that you know, we have the ability, and I'm not, now I'm going to disclaimer, not dismiss medication or other treatments, but
Right.
we have the ability, when practiced and really effective, to heal ourselves. Alison, I'm sure, shares some moments in her book, which we'll have her back in June if her schedule permits, as well as I've been able to do it. I've had a laundry list of terminal autoimmune conditions as well as, medical conditions. And it was at that moment, mind over matter, that the matter in my mind mattered most, especially when health is your number one asset, for you're not here without it. So, anything else, some closing and final thoughts, Allison, that you have for our audience?
I know I'm excited to get to know you and just go check out alisonreeves.co/everything for all of my free offers and then more about the book, of course.
Excellent. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, all of my guests' information will be found in the show notes to explore more. This is just a small nugget of what my collaborations and connections with these individuals as I spotlight them, to hear their voice, to make this silence be resounding and creating and continuing their legacy that they leave in their life. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another segment of Unleashing the Champion Within podcast with your host, Andrea Mason, your global voice, alumna of Les Brown, and the creator and innovator of Press Play. Stay tuned for next time's segment, and I'll see you real soon. Thank you. Thank you, Allison. Take
Thank
care.
you.